Hello, I'm Ken Burrell from
the PMO Professionals.
This is one of a series of videos expanding on the Success Stories Shared initiative started in South Africa by Linky van der Merwe of Virtual Project Consulting and Louise Worsley of PyCubed, and which has their enthusiastic support. Aldous Huxley said that men do not learn very much from the lessons of history is the most important of all the lessons of history. Project management research has shown that project managers prefer to learn by face-to-face interaction rather than by searching through lessons learned databases. I think that project managers can learn a lot from each other's success stories and even more from each other's scars. So, as part of my campaign for real project managers, on your behalf, I'm talking to some real project managers I've had the pleasure of working alongside so that you can benefit from their experience. Today, I'm delighted to have with me John McIntyre, who's going to share some of his experiences with us. John, I'd like you to start, if you can, by introducing yourself and giving us a flavour of your background and how you got into project management.
Thanks, Ken. I'm John McIntyre. I run a website called hotpmo.com. Came into project management it's an easy one to remember because it was Y2K, so it was about year 2000, which means I can do a fairly easy maths calculation and work out I've been doing it for about 18 years. So I've worked across banking, telecoms, shipping, entertainment, kind of you name it. I've probably dabbled a bit at some point or another. So that's given me quite a broad background to draw from, and quite a few interesting experiences along the way.
Okay, and what sort of things do you do these days, project management-wise?
Nowadays, so I've moved on from project management to running a large enterprise PMO. My team is reports directly into the exec team. There's a traditional PMO team who do centralized reporting, try and work out standards and the most efficient ways of doing things in our organization and share, evangelize and coach people in those. Then I've got a fantastic team of project managers, some of whom are doing fairly traditional, what we tend to call waterfall project management, things that have a very clear start, middle, end. I've got some who work more closely with agile projects who are looking at continuous delivery of a product. And then alongside those, I've got a small coaching function as well, who tend to focus on coaching teams, usually agile software teams, to look at how they're working, helping them work effectively and really sort of maximize the ideas, and the output and the things they're delivering.
Okay, so thinking back over your project management career, can you give us an example of a scar? So something that went wrong on a project that you were managing and how you recovered from it?
It was a project that was involving rolling out new technology across the UK. So we'd done our homework and worked it out and decided that you could roll out maybe 4 of these things to 4 different sites in a day with one person. When it got down to the detail of that, we found that actually some of these things needed swapping out on ships. And these ships had a fairly unique function. They would go out into the North Sea. There was a bank where they could hoover up sand from the seabed, and that sand would then come back to be used in everything from kids' sandpits to cement mixing. Now those ships are only really making money when they're out there hoovering, and when they're alongside, there's like a Formula 1 pit stop. They need to be all hands literally to the pumps, pumping it all off and getting out again, which means they've got no time for me and my technology projects. The only way around this was to put the engineer and the technology on the ship, wait till they've gone out and calmed down a bit, and then explain to them how the technology worked and do the transition for them. Great. Except you don't quite know when these things are going to dock again and where they're going to dock, because it depends on the price of sand and the weather and how quickly they've been able to hoover up. So what I was finding was the plans that I had for delivering rapidly at 4 sites a day were thrown into complete disarray because I was dropping engineers onto ships and getting a call anything up to 5 days later saying my engineer was landing in Rotterdam, usually with about 3 or 4 hours notice on a ship-to-shore radio system. That completely blew all the plans I had. It upset a lot of the sites.
Out of the water?
Literally out of the water, yes. It upset several of the clients that we had that we'd planned to visit on days because they suddenly found we couldn't visit them for another 4 or 5 days, and which led to a lot of people being unhappy with the project and a perception that we were being late and everything was running badly.
That's a pretty sticky situation. How did you recover?
Where originally we'd taken quite a logical approach to the planning. We'd assumed that we had a list of locations in the UK, we knew where they were, we'd mapped those out, we'd worked out we could do 4 a day, and it was a very simple case of allocating one person to 4 of those per day, getting them into regions together and making that happen. And what we had to do was come up with very, very flexible plans to take those types of scenario into account. We'd have a number of clients, we'd sort of rank them by how flexible they were. Some of our sites, they would give you a time slot and you absolutely had to be there at that time, or you would have to reschedule for weeks or months later. Whereas others were quite flexible, and as long as you had a broad window, that was fine. And you could phone them that day and be flexible on it. If I got somebody back off a ship in the UK within 24 hours, which was nice, that's great. I had a lot of flexible sites. I could instantly put those people on and we'd be getting ahead of schedule. If I found I was losing them for 5 or 6 days out at sea, then I knew I had the very, very rigid, fixed, high-profile sites covered off, and we could make the time up later on. So flexible planning was the key to pulling that one back and restoring confidence in us.
So based on that experience, what would your advice be to other people? What would you suggest they should do differently?
Whilst the approach we took was entirely valid and proved its worth as a macro level planning and estimation tool, I think the key lesson is is not to extrapolate down and make very detailed assumptions off the back of that.
Okay, so how about a success story? So something you did that went particularly well on a project, or something that you do regularly that makes things go well?
If you're in an organisation that is delivering increments to a feature, so say you're running a website and you're delivering a new feature for that website, and the reason you're delivering that is because you want to improve your product, that's fine. You can focus on putting the work in, getting the highest quality product you can, and delivering that when it's ready. If you're a company that's delivering because you've got a fixed deadline, maybe you've got a supplier who's mandated something in a contract, maybe you're working towards an event, that can be far more challenging. And what you'll find is you're then working with commercial people who are trying to pin down exactly when something will be delivered. And whilst in theory, working to an agile method where you have a velocity for teams, it should be more predictable to forecast when something will be delivered. That isn't always the case, and it can be quite challenging. Now, when you look across multiple teams and you look at stories that teams are delivering, with a big enough sample size, stories broadly end up being about the same size. Yes, you'll get some variances on those. I'm not telling you what size that is because that will change by company and change by environment and situation. But broadly speaking, you can start to get a feeling and sort of say, okay, so for this team, a story usually takes them around 4 days. That's irrelevant of how big that story is, because you're doing this over a big sample size and saying normally that's like that. Now the beauty of that is, for estimation, you can actually say, how big is this in terms of stories? You don't need to estimate that in story points or anything like that. You say, this feels like it's about 30 stories of work, which is great. Now, what I've then seen teams do is take that, apply a velocity figure to it, and then say, well, therefore our delivery date is this. That's where things get sticky, because what that is normally giving you is an average. That is the average date that will be delivered. And as we know from my SCAR earlier, average doesn't always mean what it says. If you're contracting to that, it's quite dangerous. And based on those memories, we played around with it. There's some great work done by Tony McGuinness and Dan North's done some investigation into this as well. But looking at using the concept of Monte Carlo analysis, but applied carefully and used in the right way, it can be a really valuable tool in these situations. So by taking a historical sample of stories and how they were sized and how long they actually took to deliver, running that through a Monte Carlo simulation, you can actually work out what's my 50th percentile, 80th percentile, 90th percentile. What that gives you is a unique conversation you can have with your commercial people or your clients or anyone else to say, right, based on what we think this piece of work is, the average time we'll deliver this, the velocity on this is actually we'll deliver this in 2 months' time, for example. However, if you're contracting to this, then maybe you want to increase our chances of delivering to it and have a high degree of confidence. So we might say, let's take the 80th percentile. And what we're saying there is, if this is a 30-story project 80% of the time we know we can deliver 30 stories at the 80th percentile, which might be, for argument's sake, 3 months. So maybe that would be the better one to contract around. Now, if that date is absolutely drop dead and there's massive financial penalties and it's a life or death project, you might be pushing that to 90, 95th percentile. Yeah. And what you might find is, with all the edge cases in there, that might suddenly skew out to 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. But it's a great tool for having those conversations that take it away from a hard deadline, take it away from those answers that you normally get from velocity modeling, where you end up with a date that you're normally 50-50 chance of delivering, and actually share some of that risk. You're getting buy-in from the customer, from the stakeholder, from the business. What do we want to say? This feels like something we can do with an 80% confidence by that date. If you're not happy with that, what do we take out? What's the amount of stuff we do to give the confidence level that you're happy with? Now, we need to be careful because these are unique projects. Sometimes they are going to skew. There is still that risk, and you can't overlook the 20%. It's entirely possible that you may use that modelling scenario, run 5 projects in a row, and every single one of them runs past that date, because that's entirely statistically feasible. Yes. But it's not a perfect model, but there are no perfect models.
John, thanks for your time and your insights. So today we've heard from John about something that went wrong on a project he was managing, and about something that he does regularly that helps things to go well. Anton Chekhov said, "Knowledge is of no value unless you put it into practice." I think the value of learning comes not from documenting the past, but from changing what we do in the future. So my challenge to you is, what can you learn from this? What will you do differently in your projects as a result of John's experience? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video and found it stimulating, please leave a comment or a like or both, or share it with others on social media. If you think these videos are useful and interesting, let me know and I'll make more of them. If you'd like to appear in one, let me know. For other videos on project management topics, take a look at my video channel. For articles on project management and PMO topics, visit my website,
thepmoprofessionals.com.
To connect with me more personally, search LinkedIn for Ken Burrell,
the PMO Professionals.
In the meantime, until the next time, thanks for watching.